You know, Mike, many of us have been involved in understanding a new kind of spirituality. You know, they call it the New Age, they call it spiritualism. And it seems like many of us started in the 70s.
Yeah, it seemed like it was a 70s hip thing to be.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's been around a little bit longer.
Well, that's very, very true. As a matter of fact, when I started reading some of the information, I ran across an Emanuel Swedenborg. And he was an author in which he showed a number of different things, but I'll be quite frank with you, I had a very difficult time understanding. And, I sort of laid some of his books down and said, I'll get to that later, etc. But it's been our fortunate process in welcoming Curtis Child. Curtis has been studying, he's been working with the Swedenborg Foundation, which provides a variety of different kinds of information about what Swedenborg has been saying.
Yeah, and they've got their own YouTube channel that might even rival ours. I don't know, how many videos do you guys have?
We got a few hundred videos on there.
Yeah, a few hundred. I thought, they're
we're
doing it a little bit longer.
we're about the same way, only we're missing a zero somewhere.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, we want to welcome you, Curtis, to our program, and thank you very much for sharing some information about Emanuel Swedenborg.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Can you tell the listening audience a little bit about you personally?
Sure, happy to do it. So my name is Curtis, and I'm currently hosting this show on YouTube. Monday nights we call it Swedenborg and Life, and usually when people hear that title, they have the same question, which is what's a Swedenborg? And we're going to get into that soon. But we attempt to look through these concepts that you were talking about that can be confusing at times, and get into them and see are there diamonds in the rough there? Are there things that not only are interesting to learn and sound cool and feel cool, but can affect positive change in life, that can make life better, that can solve problems, that can give us tools to, I think you'd call it, grow spiritually, become more pleasant people to be around, and inhabit a more pleasant world. So that's what we're trying to do. And I've been a reader of Swedenborg my whole life. I mean, my parents read Swedenborg. So from a very early age, I don't think many people have this, but for me, it was normal to have Swedenborg around. Of course, there's Swedenborg. I, of course, as a child, wasn't reading the books. As you said, the material is pretty intense at the grade reading level there. But I was exposed to some of the ideas, and I had this growing interest in the concepts and this growing draw to explore it further. And there was a point in my life when I really started to run into some trouble. This is like you're just getting into young adulthood, 18, 19, 20, and I found out that this is how it goes for a lot of people, but you kind of hit a wall, or I did. I had depression, I was obsessive compulsive, I was really struggling because it's really hard to get my thoughts and my feelings to leave me alone. I was just in this tough spot, and I was looking around for what's going to help me out. And I was doing all these things. I was, doing the normal things. You got to get exercise. You got to make sure you're hydrated. The physical stuff, don't underestimate it. Doing some talk therapy, all of that. But in there, I really gave Swedenborg a second look and began to see this not as this arcane stuff from a guy a couple hundred years ago, but as this is talking about exactly what's happening in my life right now. And this is not only describing it, but it's offering me valuable commentary and ways to navigate this better than I ever have before. So I found this is cool, this helps people, and eventually through a series of I would call them fortunate accidents, I ended up where I am, which is working with the Swedenborg Foundation, trying to take this message and put it out to people. I'm a digital media producer there, so I host the show and part of its creation, as well as do a few other things around the foundation. I got a bachelor's degree in communications, and I have a fish tank and some video games and that kind of stuff. So very interesting person.
Well, yeah,
like you said, even when did he live? Around the 1700s?
That's right. He was born in the late 1600s, died in the late 1700s.
Yeah, and people are basically people. We have the same problems. We may live in a different time period, but there's relationship and the dying and illness and the basics are still true. So it's not
right.
a faraway land that has nothing to do with us.
And each one of us, I think, similar to the experience that you had our own personal crisis. In growing up, it's very difficult sometimes to be one day somebody's child, and the next day be your own man or your own woman.
Yeah.
And sometimes we need that space of time to really figure out who we are, what we're doing, where do we want to go.
Absolutely.
I went to the Army. They told me.
Yeah. You outsourced that, right?
Well, it's also interesting. Emanuel Swedenborg grew up in a very religious home. I think his father became a Lutheran bishop.
Yep.
He was instilled with the sense of ritual kinds of Christianity. It was a very loving, from what I understand, a very loving environment. But he did have some questions, and perhaps you can share a little bit more about
like the basic tenets of what he was trying to get across.
So yeah, I'll tell you the story of how Swedenborg became Swedenborg. I mean, he grew up in a religious household. His father was a Lutheran bishop, but that wasn't the path he was taking. He was a scientist. I mean, he was you could call him a genius, a prodigy. They look back now and try to estimate the IQs of people, and they're estimating him as being one of the top of all time. And he for the first part of his life, I forget the exact number, but he enrolled at the university at a ridiculously young age, like in his teens or something, and was able to excel and get his PhD by 21, I believe.
Which country is this he's in?
What's that?
Which country?
This is Sweden.
Sweden, right.
Yeah, so Swedenborg, he grew up in Sweden, and he was at the height of his career, which up till his 50s, entering his 50s, if someone said, who is Swedenborg, they'd say, oh, he's that scientist. And he was sort of a rock star scientist. He was what you would call a Renaissance man. He was at the cutting edge of all kinds of fields of study, and very diverse fields of study. That he was in charge of mining for Sweden's economy, which back then, mining was like petroleum. It was a huge deal, and for him to be the assessor of mines there was a big appointment. But he was also a leading authority on anatomy. He published this huge work on the workings of the human body. He was working with developing metals. It just goes on and on. He had all kinds of success, and he was getting papers published. He published this thing called the Principia, which did really well, got him well respected. The newspapers would say, hey, Swedenborg is in town. When he would come to Amsterdam, they would announce it, because he was on track to be very successful and to be remembered. I'd say if he hadn't had something happen to him in his 50s, we'd probably be talking about him alongside Newton and those guys as just a brilliant mind who contributed a lot to the sciences. So he wasn't following his dad's path of doing the religious thing. He was doing the scientific thing, although I think he still had a lot of affection for the Christian tradition he was raised in. But then mid-50s, something changed. And it's actually very well documented. He kept a journal of his dreams, and he was actually not only writing down the dreams, but he was sort of psychoanalyzing his own dreams at the same time, which you got to remember, this is before Freud or anything. That wasn't a normal thing for people to do, but he would write a dream and say, I think that the black dog that I saw symbolizes this, and the horse symbolizes that. He was getting more and more, but these dreams became more and more intense. And at one point, there was a spillover to where he started to have experiences during his waking life, where he was having what we would now call out-of-body or spiritual experiences, and that there was a couple of really powerful ones sent him on this trajectory where his whole life changed. The purpose of his life changed. From then on, he dropped the scientific works he was writing on and started to write about his spiritual experiences and what he was learning about this other reality that is actually, he says, the source of this reality that we're interacting with here. So from then on, as you can imagine, that had an intense impact on his career and what people thought of him. And so he kind of slipped into obscurity, because you start saying that you can talk to spirits, and some people are going to love you, most people are going to say what's wrong with you.
Yeah, he
right?
was he was thinking outside the box when the box had very thick sides.
There wasn't much good real estate outside the box at the time, and so, but that was how he continued to the end of his life, and the way that he describes it, he was having what we would now call near-death experiences or spiritual experiences at will, continuously for 30 years in a row. And he was writing from those every single day, and he published an amazing amount, 27, 28 volumes, depending on how it's translated. And he left for us this very, very detailed, practical description of almost every facet of metaphysics or of life or whatever you want to call it. That now it's up to us to pick through and see was he really seeing the underlying essence of reality. So that's what we're trying to figure out at the foundation, and what our audience and us look for every Monday.
But he didn't make predictions and that sort of thing, did he?
Nope. He said that no, his stuff is. I feel like it's in a different category than a lot of other stuff. There was no predictions. The whole thing boils down to kind of a code of life. And this is that he goes and has these fantastic experiences, but the takeaway message is: here's how you live your life every day to be a good person and to affect the world in a positive way. And he actually said that nobody knows the future, and we don't really need to want to know the future. What you really want to do is figure out how you can best serve and trust the workings of divine providence and work with it as you can. But no, he didn't make predictions. He didn't try to say this kind of war is going to happen in 300 years or something like that. He would make spiritual predictions, meaning he talked about a new era coming for humanity, which he called the new mindset or the new church, where we would be able to, there would sort of be a reestablished connection with the spiritual world, where people would just generally be a lot nicer to each other. But he didn't give any kind of time frame, and he never made any specific predictions like in 1905 there's going to be a war or something like that.
I was just making the comparison to like Casey or Nostradamus or somebody like that.
Sure. Yep.
What from what I've read and watched your videos and some of the information that you have, he was really in awe of the other side. And when he would look at the various different things and he would write them down, you could see sort of a sense of, wow, I can't believe I'm actually involved in this.
Well, it would be like watching a science fiction movie or something. It's like, wow, that's pretty amazing that this is all possible.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's times when he just admits he's at a loss for words for things that it can't be described in earthly language. And he was really, the spectrum of stuff that he reported seeing, he was seeing the highest highs and the lowest lows, everything in between. It was really a really intense trip that he went on. And he tried his best to describe it as he could, and where he couldn't, he would just admit it. There was sort of both a human and a practical at the same time. He was trying to give point by point. This is what happens. This is why this happens. It's really awesome, and this is why. So he was trying to navigate it as a person, as you and I would. But he said that all of his scientific training leading up to that was preparing him for this, to be able to catalog it and to understand it, as though it wasn't like he had the wrong course in life and he just needs to throw it all away. The spiritual reality that he reported on is similar to the physical one in some ways, and it's part of a cohesive whole. It's not like you can just throw away what you know about the physical world and just learn the spirit. They're completely connected, and so that his work in anatomy helped him understand what he was learning spiritually. His work in all these places, he said that was him being prepared to be able to do this. That without it, he wouldn't have been able to report as effectively.
Huh. And I find that interesting. That one of the areas that he looked at was working with angels.
Yeah.
And at that time, angels were considered nearer God than they were to people.
And then at the time, the religion or the church had priests as a go-between.
Yeah.
You weren't, near that.
Yeah,
you needed
that's right.
You needed
Yes,
somebody to
you were
speak
the-
for you.
That's right.
You were not worthy. We're not worthy.
And so he sort of helped to cement those ideas. When you say, he wasn't critical extremely critical of the church. He felt that the churches established somewhat of a foundation. Am I saying this correctly?
Well, I'd say both. There was first to your point of him being saying you didn't need a go-between. When he was first publishing, he wasn't an ordained clergy, so there was a lot of backlash. Who are you to talk? Why is this scientist trying to tell us about the things of heaven and hell? And so that was something that he had to get past. But yeah, he was saying, anybody can have this kind of direct experience.
Yeah.
So this is not, there's not a class. And so as far as the Christian church, there were some things he really liked, and there were some things he took deep issue with. He was, in some senses, a reformer. He wouldn't want to abolish the church. He wasn't trying to get rid of it, but there was plenty of elements in it that he saw as deeply spiritually harmful. He talked about exactly what you mentioned there, the church sort of setting itself up as a gatekeeper, that we can choose who talks to God, how they talk to God. We'll tell you what God says, and we can. And in some cases, certain church organizations were even saying, if we kick you out of heaven, you're out of heaven. If we want to send you to hell, you're in hell. And he was saying that this was causing havoc not only on this side, but in the spiritual world. In heaven and hell, those ideas were causing all kinds of problems, and that they weren't true, and that this was something he needed to spend a lot of energy trying to combat, because he saw this as extremely damaging to everybody's spirits. The people who were telling this stuff to people, that was damaging themselves, because they were putting these false ideas and ingraining them in their mind. And in the spiritual world that he describes, ideas matter. Ideas and motives. That's what really sticks. Possessions, rank, all that stuff goes, but the kind of mindset you have and the things you care about and act on, that's what makes you who you are, and that's what goes with you. So if you tenaciously latch onto a worldview and you're unwilling to reconsider it, it can cause you all kinds of problems, and you can deceive people. They have all kinds of problems too. Then, so he really felt like there's some things that are great about this church. But there's a lot that's really bad, and I think you can find those criticisms from many people. He just had this added dimension of saying, "I've seen the other side, and it's causing just as many problems there." And part of his mission, I think, he felt like was, He had a book he released called True Christianity, where he was saying, "Listen, there is good in there, but there's all kinds of corruption too. This is what it's supposed to be," and so he was releasing that. On the flip side, his message is very universal. It's not saying you have to be a Christian to get to heaven. It's not saying that you have to follow any particular belief system. So while he has a lot of Christianity in there and a lot of Christian language, he also presents this holistic view of the human race, which is, I think, another thing that makes Swedenborg remarkable.
That's interesting that it was during the Spanish Inquisition that he was very verbal. So I find that just
he was far enough away from Spain, I suppose.
I guess so. I know that you have several videos that outline what Swedenborg talked about when you die, when someone passes from this plane to the next. Care to share some information what Swedenborg felt would happen when you die?
Yep. And I'll give you a couple options.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about the actual process of dying, or like what happens to us next?
What happens to us next?
Yeah. So Swedenborg described something he called the spiritual world, which is like we're in the physical world right now. It doesn't mean the planet Earth. The universe would be a good descriptor for it. So he's talking about a spiritual universe. And within that, he had three basic divisions, which he uses the terms heaven, hell, and the world of spirits. There's some other little distinctions in there, but I won't get into it. And essentially, the world of spirits is a place that's midway between what he calls heaven and hell. I will say that his description of what heaven is and what hell is differs quite significantly from traditional Christian understandings. We can get into that too if you want, but just so you know, there's a lot of difference in what, even though he uses the same words, he means very different things, which is a common theme in Swedenborg. He'll kind of redefine things. But the world of spirits is this halfway point. Everybody goes there first. And this is a place where you really sort yourself out. This is a place where in the spiritual world, you can't have a front that you put up. You can't act like if I was coming on this show and I'm acting like I'm all nice and friendly, but really I'm not. I can pull that off in this world because you can be thinking and feeling one thing, but get your body in face to do the opposite thing. But there, when you're in the spirit, you've got to have authenticity. So part of what happens in the spiritual world is this process of everybody figuring out, who am I really? What do I really love? What do I really value? And what do I really want to do? It's kind of like inhibitions are sort of slowly taken away, and you find out what's really going on, and you choose your lifestyle. And so that's what's happening in the spiritual world. And Swedenborg describes when we go there, there's all kinds of people there who are willing to help you and teach you. There's like all the services you could want are there. Nobody's pushing you out or throwing you out, but if you don't, you'll naturally gravitate to where you feel comfortable. And that where you feel comfortable is around people who are like you are. So if you are living a life full of love and you love the idea of other people's happiness and you love the idea of community and sharing, you're going to go around people like that, and that's a sphere that Swedenborg called heaven. If you have primarily selfish interests and you basically regard other people as means to an end, you want control, you want power, you're going to gravitate around other people who are like that. And a room full of those people is no fun to be in. Swedenborg called that mindset hell. And these are just general terms. So the world of spirits is where you kind of find your people, your community, and then you start your spiritual life like that. But there's this interim period where you, through various experiences, kind of the masks are pulled away, and you discover and make choices about, what this is life. What do I want to get out of it? What do I think is important, and what am I going to spend my energy pursuing?
Huh, that's interesting. Does Swedenborg talk about individuals coming back? Did he believe in reincarnation, or was it a once in a lifetime? That's it.
Yeah. So no, I think Swedenborg believes in a linear progression. So that would be like, first we're in the womb and we're progressing in the womb. We're progressing in the womb. You're being built in there for something. You get born into this world, and then you progress through this world. You progress through this world, and then you essentially are born into the spiritual world when you die here. And in every stage, you're kind of being formed for the next one. Just like when you're in the womb, what you're doing there is you're developing, you're getting the structures down so that you can live in this life. He says that while we're here on this earth, we are developing our spirits, and that we're doing it through the choices and actions we make. So we're essentially this is a womb for the next life. So then when you're born there, you don't ever cycle back. You don't move backwards in that chain. It's not that things become static and it's like there's stage 1, stage 2, and then stage 3 is forever. There's always growth and change. He talks about every phase of life that you're ever in is only like a little egg to the next phase, but he doesn't talk about it being cyclical. Like you return to this planet. When we're on this planet, there's a very specific function for this, which is to build certain components of our spirit or who we are. Once that's built, then you're on to the next thing where you're building for the next thing, and you're going up and up. He says that you can be always learning and growing. That never stops, but you don't come back here to do it. There are some interesting crossovers that he seems to have with reincarnation, which is a couple of them is people will often talk about previous lives that you remember them when you're here. He accounts that to actually that you're almost having communal memory with someone else. He said you're always in this intimate connection with the spiritual world, and there are times when you're so close to your spiritual community that you're sharing an experience, and that rather than that being you tapping into your previous. But also another idea that I like in reincarnation is the idea of you get to keep working on your stuff until you get it right. And he sort of gives a nod to that, in that he talks about this thing called heredity, which is we use that word to describe physical heredity or the genes that are passed down from parents to children. He says there's a spiritual heredity as well. So whatever positive or negative progress you make gets passed on to the next generation spiritually. So each generation has a chance to work on those particular issues. It's not like the person goes back, but the issues continue to be worked on generation to generation. So there's some similarities, some differences, but in general, he seems to indicate forward progression.
Did he feel that angels had their start on Earth, or that angels were a separate group of entities?
He said everybody goes through the progression. So all conscious beings are doing the same thing that we did, which is you start, you're born into ignorance, you slowly build a mind in this world, you figure out what you love. So he said that angels are all ex-people. They at one point they were on, whether on this earth or on another part of the universe. He did believe in life outside this planet. But you start in the physical world and you go from there. And he was clear about that. And he says that angels are it's not just like I by definition become an angel if I cross over. That's a process you go through. It has to do with an opening of the mind and moving into heaven and a growing. It's only when you get to a certain point that you would be what Swedenborg calls an angel, and you've transformed so much by then that you really do have all these amazing qualities that people report when they encounter angels. Swedenborg would say those were all people at one point, and I know many people have different opinions on it, but that was what he was saying.
I think it's good. What is our purpose, according to Emanuel Swedenborg, for being on Earth?
Yeah. Well, the purpose of life, he spells it out as divine providence. He talks about divine providence, which he says this is the guidance of God over everything. This is the divine plan that is behind the scenes, managing all the details of everything. The goal of divine providence is heaven from the human race. And heaven meaning this is an intimate communal interaction of the whole human race. We're all here to make everybody as happy as possible. But in regard to specific people, every single person is unique, and I think a lot of people say that, but everyone has the opportunity to understand the truth and love in a different way than anybody else can. And because of that, we all have a specific contribution that we can make to the whole in a way that nobody else can make it. And he says that the heart of divine providence is to prepare us for this specific place. He talks about the joy of heaven. The joy of heaven is the joy of doing something for a greater cause, for a greater good. If you've ever been involved in a project that you really believed in, like the passion and the feeling that you get from that, that's a little bit of heaven. When you think about when you're doing something and you're genuinely thinking about the good impact it has, that's a little bit of heaven. So the goal is for each of us to get to the place where we can contribute our little heaven to the human race in a way that nobody else can. So that's the goal according to him, and he gives all kinds of detail. But in a nutshell, it's you can do good for everyone in a way that nobody else can.
That's interesting. And if someone should choose a lifestyle that is meism and not weism, where they do atrocious things, do they end up in hell for the rest of their entirety?
That's a great question. So Swedenborg seems to give passages indicating both ways. I'll talk a little bit about it. Okay. What he says that there has to be freedom. There's a lot of traditions to say there has to be freedom, but he says that anything that we're doing not in a state of freedom doesn't stay with you. If somebody's forcing you to do something, like if you're little and your parents say you have to believe this or do this, as soon as you can, you're going to throw it off. And you're going to have people who are forced by the threat of power, coerced into doing things, but it doesn't really become a part of them. So freedom is essential to only when we do something because we want to do it, does that become a part of us. So that's why there's this development period here in the world where we have this freedom between positive and negative things, and we can really in a real-time simulation say, oh, I like this thing, I'm going to do it, or I don't like this thing, I'm not going to do it. That said, there's always time given for people to make choices, and there is some choosing in the world of spirits as well. That the separation, that there is where you can kind of make discernments as well, and then once you get to heaven or hell, you're there because you absolutely love it. And that may sound strange in the context of hell, but Swedenborg's hell is not a hell of punishment for the things that you've done.
No fire.
There's not fire. There's not God getting revenge, through like you did this. It's hell is actually designed. We did a show called "The Good Thing About Hell." Hell is God's arrangement so that you can have the happiest possible life you can have if you've chosen to love really harmful things. Like obviously there's limits. You find people, there'll be like a interview. Have you guys ever seen those crime shows like A&E or something
Yeah.
where they interview these like a serial killer or something, and you get people who just love to kill people. That to them is like, it's not like, oh, I just had to grit my teeth. It's like that's the thing they love to do the most. Obviously, if that's the thing you love to do the most, you're going to have limits placed on you, right? I mean, for the safety of everyone else, we lock people up because we say you're too dangerous to have roaming around. So the more you love what is destructive, the less freedom you can have, because you're not free to just go harm innocent people. At the same time, God is going to try to let everybody have the life where they experience the most joy they can, based on what they love. So if you're in a hell state of mind, it's because you've said, "Hey, man, the ego stuff, the meism, I really like it, and this is what I want to do." So it's not like anyone's.
It makes sense.
It's not like anyone's keeping you there, but you're keeping yourself there because you've entrenched yourself and you don't want to learn or change. So you'll be there for as long as you love it. But Swedenborg seems to say that once you really love something, you don't give it up. Now, we're talking about to eternity. I don't know. That's a long time. As one Swedenborgian scholar said when asked, "Do people stay in hell forever?" He said, "Well, they haven't yet." Right. So as far as how does the whole Swedenborg actually described a pretty dynamic spiritual world. He talked about new heavens being formed and things shifting around. My hunch would be eventually there's got to be a way that people get out of that. He does talk about reformation of people and them being purged of things that are harmful to them. So I would imagine there's some path, but Swedenborg doesn't explicitly state it.
So he's not into predestination and be more freedom of choice, free will.
He has devotes a few chapters to everything that's wrong with predestination. He says that no, everything is completely free will, and God is not interested in punishing anyone. And he actually says everyone's predestined from heaven. We sort of have to heaven. We sort of have to opt out, to get out of it. That there's this immense gravity trying to pull everyone into heaven. You really got to swim against the current to get out of it, but the goal of divine providence, as I was saying before, is heaven. That's the point everyone was born for, is to be in this heavenly happiness and to be there more and more forever. So there's certainly no predestination in that way.
That's somewhat disappointing for some people who just somebody kills their child and they'll get theirs on the other side.
Yeah, right. I think that.
Because that's somewhat satisfying for some people's psyche, I think.
Yep, and in the short term,
right.
Like okay, so somebody even if somebody killed someone in my family, I'm mad at him for a while, but like 40,000 years from now, is it like, is it still worth it? But I think that it's not like you just kill people and nothing happens. Swedenborg talks about people in the next life being confronted by the people they killed, in front of everyone. And like there's nothing that he says evil carries with it its own punishment, but he just says it's not eternal conscious torture. That there isn't. But even so, angels and God are not interested in revenge. Doesn't matter how bad you did something. He says that any angel would gladly switch places with anyone in hell if it meant that person could be in heaven. So there's this love regardless. It's not like enabling love, like it's not that you go just do anything you want, kill anyone you want, I love you so much, just do what makes you happy. There's wisdom, but the heart of it is looking for the happiness of that person, even if that means you think about it, in this world, right? If there's somebody who has a really destructive habit, you may love them, but you may have to be really tough with them and say, no, I'm not, you can't stay in my house, whatever it is, because that's the best thing for them. It doesn't mean you hate them. It doesn't mean you want them to suffer. It means that in the end, you want their happiness. So that's kind of the same dynamic.
So you'd mentioned one thing I think that drew you to it is it helps you live life. So what ideas did you gain from this that helped you with solving problems and dealing with things?
Don't believe everything you think. I think is the biggest one. Swedenborg says that this heaven and hell we've been talking about is constant. There's an equilibrium inside our minds as well. Like there's always little images of the whole and everything. So I said there's like heaven and hell and a world of spirits in between. In our minds, there's like heaven and hell and a world of spirits in between. And he says that we're being influenced by both all the time. And this is in pop culture. You see the angel and the devil on the shoulder, right? But he was saying this is really true. That there are evil and false things coming into your psyche from hell, and there are good and true things coming in from heaven. And if you recognize that, you can let go of them. And this is like the Buddhist practice of just watch thoughts instead of identifying with them. It's the same kind of thing. There was actually a guy named D.T. Suzuki, who I don't know if you've heard of him. He was sort of credited with bringing Zen Buddhism to the West. And he wrote a book that was called Swedenborg, Buddha of the North, because there's a lot of symbolisms with Eastern worldviews and what Swedenborg wrote. Anyway, Swedenborg talks about, he gives the specifics about how heaven and hell were affecting his mind. He kept this journal of spiritual experiences, so he'd give you sort of the raw data every day, and you can read through that. And I'm not like seeing angels and devils, but I'm seeing thought patterns. And I'm seeing sort of ruminations and emotional traps and that kind of thing. And you can see parallels. And like you see the way he dealt with it, and then you deal with it in your own way like that. I found that there are things that you can be stuck in for a long time. You get a concept like that, and suddenly the same fear that was dragging you down has no potency. Or the same argument in your head that you couldn't get out of, you can get out of now. And so for me, it's worked well. I feel like that's been the most potent thing. There are a lot of beautiful ideas. I think that the idea of divine providence, or that there's nothing allowed that isn't, in the moment it can be really painful and bad, but in the end it's working for good. And the way that he describes that can give you hope when there's difficult things going on. And then there are practical tools about how does the heaven mindset show up? What does the heavenly mindset think about? And what does it not think about? And I can take those and say, all right, so I'm going to kind of cultivate the garden of my mind. I'm going to pull out these thoughts, kind of like weeds. I'm going to instead focus on these things. And then through that, I find that you can, from what was chaos, you get a nice place to sit.
It's interesting. As you were going through there, I was thinking a little bit. We think each one of us, as you said, are unique. We think uniquely. During that period of time, there was sort of a male paternalism with the different churches, to where women were not considered equals. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that.
A patriarchal thing.
Yes. So how did Swedenborg distinguish between men and women? And keep in mind, we're talking about 300 years, or 250, 300 years of culture change.
Yeah, that's right. So he didn't, he had a lot to say about everything, and that included gender and what makes a male and a female, but he never said like somebody's better than somebody else. And he, as you were saying, he said that anybody, the mindset you're supposed to get into is you want to be less than everyone else, and not less like, oh, I'm not as good at baseball as everyone, I'm not a good artist, I don't like myself. No, meaning you want to be thinking about, how do I serve the person in front of me? So if you're a man and you think you're better than women, that's hell, because hell wants to be better than. If you're a woman who thinks she's better than men, that's hell. Heaven doesn't want to be better than anyone. The divine love wants to serve everybody. So while he talks about the complementary design of men and women and the potential, he goes into a lot of detail about marriage in heaven, and that how you can have this bonding. He wrote a whole book called Conjugal Love, which is this Latinate sort of word. It's not conjugal. It's this different. It's got a couple letters in there, and he talks about marriages in heaven and how they are this bonding of the mind that gets so close that you can even call like a pair one angel. And he talks about he goes and visits them and asks, "Okay, how does your marriage work? What does it do?" But he said that in marriage, any love of control of one over the other destroys the marriage. That you can't have that. That it has to be each one wanting to serve the other. That as soon as you say, and that applies to all human relationships. He says that the root of hell is a love of controlling other people, of having dominion. So any kind of domination of one gender over the other, of one partner over the other in a marriage or any relationship, that snuffs out heaven faster than you could believe. So he talks about the need to not, you don't want to set yourself up on a pedestal because you're not better than anyone else. God is good. All the stuff that we're claiming as ours, that this makes me better, that's coming out of God. And where we really want to get to as a heavenly mindset is not where I'm not thinking about who's better and who's worse. I'm thinking about how do I help and how do I help and not put myself on the cover of a magazine. That I want to help, not because of how it's going to make me look.
I see.
I just had the idea of a rowboat, and I've got one side, and say like, wife, or say like you got the other side, and we have to be going in the same direction, and it can't be all about me because then we'll just go in circles.
That's right. That's right.
Good point.
Yep.
That's a good point.
Just hitting that water. Yep.
So in our lifetimes, most individuals know that life is not fair. Some of us are born in poverty. Some of us are born in lives of destruction and ruin, war-torn areas. Other individuals live like kings and queens, where we can go to the refrigerator and the food practically falls out of the refrigerator, and we have much wealth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and some of the things people do to each other are just not good.
Yeah,
to say the least.
And so, how did Swedenborg think about those situations to where, since life is not fair, we sort of have to prove our worth to get to heaven, if I'm saying that correctly.
Okay, yeah. So I think what you're, tell me if this is right, what you're thinking of, if let's say somebody is raised in poverty, they're going to have a lot more of a draw to, let's say, I need to sell drugs in order to feed my family, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody who's born rich, they don't need to do it anyway. So is there going to be points skewed against them? The external actions don't matter. Motives matter. Swedenborg says a single external action done by 1,000 different people can look 1,000 different ways to an angel, because what really matters is your motives. So if you are, even if you're, we're doing a show about, he said he was talking to a group of spirits and said, if somebody, came and destroyed the whole Christian church, but was doing it from a good motive, they're not going to be in trouble for that. It's all about motives. But back to so from that right there, obviously God is going to have the inside track on the external factors that are affecting our situation, and making it harder or easier for us. But even apart from social class, there are just some people who you can be born. There's some people who really struggle with wanting to steal things, right? They just want to steal, like the kleptomania, something like that. For me, that doesn't come up. Not saying I don't have other issues, but that's just never been something I had to fight. So do I get into heaven because I never stole anything, or never stole anything serious? So you got
stolen someone's heart.
Yeah. No, I don't think anyone's worried about that. But that's one dynamic. But as far as the rich and the poor thing, like what isn't there this huge strata? And there certainly is. Swedenborg actually addresses it directly, and he says, life is short, life is temporary. What is spiritual is eternal. So wealth can be either a blessing or a curse, depending. If you are rich and that fosters in you an opinion that you are better than other people, that can be a real problem, because that opinions stay with you. And if you're poor and that fosters in you an opinion that, hey, I'm not better than other people, that can be a blessing. That can actually help you out on the other side. So it's not that this is the ideal, where people are rich and poor. I think in a perfect society, everybody would have access to what they need to live a happy, healthy, safe life, be able to develop. I'm not trying to advocate for there always should be rich and there always should be poor, but we never know what divine providence is really doing. That you could have all of our life circumstances, and there can be two people who have the same amount of wealth, but one has this really horrific things happen to them and the other doesn't. All of that is being used in some way for spiritual benefit. And he says that, wealth, as I said, wealth or status can be just as toxic as it can be liberating. You may enjoy it for 30 years, but it may be spiritually detrimental. So while I don't think it's good that there's these differences in what life gives you right out of the gate, it doesn't mean that you get hit with a double whammy. Like you're poor, and because you're poor, you don't deserve heaven, right? It's actually each individual is on their own path, and that you can, and vice versa. You can have rich people that are spiritually developing well and poor people that are developing not well. It doesn't. It's sort of independent of circumstances. It's not saying that the suffering isn't there and that it isn't real and that we shouldn't be trying to mitigate that. But on the spiritual end, and that's the end that lasts forever, according to Swedenborg, like we were talking about, it doesn't mean that you have a leg up just because you have a leg up physically, and it doesn't mean that you're in a bad situation if you're there spiritually, if you're there physically. So there's, and he also talks about, I mentioned heredity before, or sort of the predispositions we have towards good or bad things. Our lives are also measured against those, meaning, like I was saying, for some people it's very difficult to do the right thing. Other people it's easy. So it doesn't mean that that the people for whom it's hard get fewer points because they did it's not like that. It's not a test where you get a certain color medal. It's about when you're in freedom, what do you love and do? If you're in crushing poverty, you don't have as much freedom because you just don't have options. It's when you can do whatever you want. What do you do? And none of us really know what their motives are, what's in their heart, and we don't know what their spirit is like. As Swedenborg says, you never know what it's going to be like after death for any one individual. So we're not supposed to judge and say, I know you're good or I know you're bad, because we don't know. So those are a few scattered thoughts on your question.
I know some people would ask me, well, how do you explain, the guy or person who rapes a 1-year-old and a 1-year-old dies? How is that fair? Or what happens?
Yeah. So I think it's never going to be that is fair, meaning like that's okay. Although I think eventually everyone involved in the situation could get to the point where it was. You think about people who report near-death experiences. They talk about getting a sort of a life review, and they go and they see all the events in their life, and all the ones that I've seen, when they see what the larger plan was, they say, okay, that's all right. That in the end, it's okay. Even so the scenario you're describing is about the worst thing that can happen, right? However, that poor little kid, if they go on to, Swedenborg says that every child who dies is brought into heaven and is raised there, right? So if that little kid ends up, we're down the road, they end up happy and safe and whole and fulfilled, and all the family members that are devastated by that actually grew out of their grief, and now have a deeper connection to this child and to all of humanity. You think about all the people who have had tragedies, and then from that gone on to start some foundation that addresses that and change the world in that regard. Not saying that it's ever going to be okay or anything close to okay in the moment, but in the long game, I think that's where the fairness is. And I don't think we have to expect ourselves to be able to feel that here. I mean, I think we're human, and it's not ever going to be like, I'm going to be, I've read so much Swedenborg that I don't care when my friend gets killed. That's never going to be what it is, but I think that can add a little element of solace to those horrific situations to think of. In the end, I was reading an experience that somebody had where their friend was a counselor to prisoners, and she was murdered while she was doing a counseling visit. And this person actually got this sort of after-death communication from them. And she said that her friend who was murdered said, it's all right. Even during the experience of me being murdered, God was changing that, she says, into these like flashing precious jewels or something. It's hard to understand what she's talking about, but she said, I'm fine, and then she laughed, and the person recording the story said that gentle laugh did more to alleviate my sorrow than anything else could have. So there can be a way that it's okay if we see everyone eventually and everyone's all right, but it doesn't mean it's ever going to fully take away the pain of something like that happening in life.
Right. There was Dolores Cannon says there's things that like contracts, that if somebody comes and goes out of your life, or this person was here to get this done, and maybe that child or whatever was put here to make something else happen, but that has to happen first.
Yeah. So and in the end, as unbelievable as it is, something good is going to come out of it, and everybody, while they may not be protected externally, physically, spiritually, there is this protection, and the spirit is where it's really going to last.
Right.
Swedenborg Foundation is filled with a lot of very good, useful information, and I know that you have only touched upon maybe a drop of water in a big pool that is available, etc. How did the Swedenborg Foundation start? What was its beginnings?
Yeah, it began a long time ago, and I always forget the date because it was more than 100 years ago, 150 years ago. And it was originally a publisher. It was formed by Swedenborg himself. He didn't really start a group or anything like that. He just published books and tried to send them to universities to get them started. But shortly after his death, groups of people who were reading his materials got together and formed various organizations. And the foundation, for a long time, was keeping his books in print and translating those, and sort of had a mission to keep that going. And it actually had a different title a long time ago and then changed, and it was in a couple of different locations. And just recently, we've begun to really do stuff on the web a lot. There was a small press we were doing for a while where we published collateral works and published his work. So the mission is to foster an increasingly broad conversation around the ideas of Swedenborg. What we're trying to do is we're saying, hey, there is cool stuff in here that we all missed. History kind of forgot him, but he can add to the current conversation. So let's get it out there.
I very much
so that's
agree.
the point of it.
And I like the way on some of your videos where you take from his text, you read a paragraph or two, and then you help the listening audience to understand in the context he was wanting to say. And
that's right.
We as the viewers and listeners can sort of mold that around and sort of fit that into our understanding.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I know that you have, let's see, you have foundation news, you have a blog on there, you have videos, you have ebooks.
Yes.
And basically the purpose of the writings, they're based on the philosophy that the purpose of the humanity is to allow God's all-inclusive and infinite love to enter all of us.
That's right.
And manifest through that progress. And let's talk a little bit about the foundation. You're talking about ebooks.
Yeah. So if you go to Swedenborg.com is our website. We are currently leading a new translation effort. It's called the New Century Edition, because some of Swedenborg's books haven't been translated into English in 100 years. So that we have quite old translations, which makes them even more confusing because you have the language that's outdated and everything like that. So we're currently running a new translation, and we have all of those. We haven't translated all of them yet, but all the ones that we have are available for free as ebooks or as PDFs. And then we also have a back catalog of all the old translations of Swedenborg's works that can all the green covered books. The previous translations are available there as well. We don't have PDFs of all of them, but we do have some of them, and you can check those out or get an e-reader copy of them, EPUB. And we, as you mentioned, we have a blog. We have social media presences. We're on Facebook. We have this YouTube channel, youtube.com/offtheLeftEye. But if you go to Swedenborg.com, it's the hub. You'll be able to find anything that you're looking for there.
I like some of your popular ebooks. There's one called Our Life After Death, The Lies of Angels, Afterlife, How I Would Help the World, and on and on and on. And you have some. So you say that they're at no cost.
With certain ones, everything that we can do in ebook format, we give away for free. Because we're a nonprofit, and the idea is to get the ideas out there rather than build a paywall. The ones that are physical books, they cost money because it costs
Sure.
too much for us to print them and ship them.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be able to maintain ourselves. But in general, and all the online programming that we do on YouTube and everything, obviously that's accessible for free. We're trying to get it so that anybody who has an interest and is in need of some kind of spiritual lift, they can get everything they want. And then on the back end, if people feel like it, they can donate to us, and that's how we kind of run our model.
Huh. And then you have Off the Left Eye program that you do on Monday evenings. What time is that on Monday evenings?
Yep. So that's every Monday at 8 o'clock. We live stream that on YouTube, youtube.com/offtheLeftEye. If you miss it on Monday night, you can watch all of our episodes archived on the YouTube channel.
Okay. And I know you have a variety of different ones, and it's just not on one particular subject. Basically, it's how you can live your life better to the fuller extent without a lot of tremendous effort. I know that Off the Left Eye, you have over 40,000 subscribers, so you're doing some right things, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a really exciting couple of years here since we built that channel just a few years ago, and to see it do well and to do well on Facebook. Because you got to understand, for most of my life, nobody wanted to talk about Swedenborg. There was a couple of people knew about Swedenborg, but I rarely had conversations with people who hadn't, outside that little group about Swedenborg. And for me to get to see people on the internet interested in learning and enjoying it, and to actually see people write to us and say, "Oh, this is changing my life," that's cool. And it's a new experience for me, and I'm just loving the ride. So it's also been amazing to see how many interested people there are in spirituality and in this kind of stuff. So I've really enjoyed it, and it's great to get to talk to people like you about it as well.
Well, I know that one of our previous guests was looking forward to the interview with you because she's read a number of different articles and looked at your website, etc. And when Mike and I mentioned that we had you, Curtis, coming on, she said, "Oh, that'll be great. I'll be tuning right in." So, and she's over in England, so your information is just not for the United States; it's for many individuals, etc. Our time is coming down, and hopefully we'll have you back on. There's a lot of things that you and your team and the Swedenborg Foundation is involved in, and I think it's very important that the listening audience at least tie in or listen to one or two of your videos. We can glean something from anything, as long as we're open. And your foundation, the foundation, your involvement, I think is really good.
How many people are part of the home office?
Sure. So in total, I think you have about 10 people. But then there's also a subset working on the translation. But overall, you could fit us all in a van.
Any thoughts you'd like to share with the listening audience?
I would say that we talk about spirituality, and we talk about these big things and these broad things and these out there things. And what I've found is, while there's a lot to learn about this world and other worlds, it all does boil down to moment treating people well, and to look in the little things practically every day of how can I, as I'm doing this, think about how this is helping the world, and how do I develop myself into someone who can really help, and that gives me not just something to do, but starts to introduce me into this joy of the spiritual joy of I made a difference, and that lasts. And that even though Swedenborg wrote all this stuff about heaven, hell, angels, and spirits, it all came back to kindness and love. And when you feel that, you can tell this is spiritual. When somebody is helping you or you're helping them, it doesn't need to be explained. It's that it's the core of everything, and I think it's good to keep that in mind, as we learn things.
Well, I really want to thank you. The sad part about our program is it always comes to an end.
We could sit here till 8 at night or something.
Yeah, yeah. But I want to thank you. Again, we're talking with Curtis Child. He's the producer and host of Swedenborg and its
In Life.
In Life.
So Google it, or I'll have the links down below the video here on YouTube. So all kinds of links and ways to find what you're talking about.
And the listening audience should visit his program, and then if they are so inclined, contribute to the efforts that they are doing, because it's all very good.
Going out to help people, which is, I think, part of the meaning of life. We're here.
Yeah.
We're here to help.
Absolutely.
So, again, thank you. I'm Patrick.
I'm Mike, and thanks for watching. And we'll see you in a few weeks, or no, a week, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
We got another one coming up next week. All right. See you then.